Welcome to our next release webinar. It's the last one this year, but hopefully still an interesting one. As usual, Berend will present all the latest updates and improvements. And as you all know by now, you can ask questions by the chat. Keep in mind that the chat is public, so everyone can see your questions and also our answers. Well, that's, I think, basically it. Berend, the floor is yours.
Okay, yeah, good morning. Welcome everyone to the webinar of new features in Base 27. I will share my screen, go over the different changes that we have made available, and will explain them in some detail. But yes, like Eldert said, please, yeah, I'm sharing my screen meanwhile, so but do not hesitate to share your questions while I'm demonstrating. I will try to pick them up if I see them. If not, we will definitely come back to them at the end of the webinar. So I'm now sharing my Base 27 screen in the demo environment, and let's go over one by one of the changes. Well, the one I want to start off with is the one about the editor of the articles in the policies, handbooks, if you like, in which you can now apply different layouts. It's become available in the last update. And what you now see is that you have on top of this screen, you can see that there are a couple of options added. Most importantly, perhaps, is the layout type that now allows you to switch between portrait, which was the default until now and the only option basically, or landscape, in which you have a little bit more room to put your text in, or if you like, you can now switch to full width, and you see the editor sizing as well, in which all the content that you want to put in this article can be shown in this way. In the preview as well, you can see what the effect is if you change the layout of the article. For example, when it would be landscape, you can see here as well, it's a landscape layout that will be shown within Base 27 for all users once this version has been approved or saved as such. This is a new feature. Another feature was already present, but you now see it here as well. You can only edit it after clicking on the pencil, because it has a more, well, I would not say devastating, but a more severe impact when you change it. That's the content type itself. So by default, that's text. But if you want to show a file instead, you can now switch more easily to this option. Previously, it was kind of hidden in the section here on the properties. So we moved it to the general editor layout to make it more accessible and easier to apply. And if you're not aware of this feature, when you click on File, you can upload a certain file, and I see I did not prepare that well, but let's take one anyway. It's about the presentation, and when you do in the preview, you will actually see that file, and when I save it, it would show the file for the other users as well. And the final option now here is to put in a link. This was already available as well, but you had to configure it through the structure of your handbook. Now we put it into the page editor and the article editor to be more easy to switch between the different types and have a more consistent way of setting up your articles and content. And also, these links to whatever site or external location that you want to link to You can now combine it with references to norms, so it makes more sense, and also to do a review on it. So even it is a link, so it doesn't really mean any content in base 27. You can still apply or make visible to the auditor in the end that the content has been reviewed through the reviewing process within base 27. So we think it's more transparent way of working with the different options that base 27 provides. And as I stated, there are now a little bit more options here as well, and then apply it for visualization in base 27 as well. So that's the first one. Let's move on through the menu as well. You know the context, and you might know that we have these, what we call the BIA columns, the Business Impact Assessment columns. Previously, these are kind of special columns because they are created dynamically based on the configuration of your BIA model, which until now kind of implied a issue in the overview of these selected categorizations of the BIA levels, for example, on the availability. Previously, there was no sorting option, and so you had to do with just the default sorting, which was probably based on the name. And then afterwards, you could not sort on any of the BIA values here. But obviously, that makes sense to do that. So we now you can sort on the BIA levels, and by that you can have a more clear view of what's really important for your, well, in this case, the overview of information systems. What are your most critical, valuable information systems? That applies to other locations as well. For example, on the processes, we have configured a different processing model in there. It's in Dutch, but it shows, for example, betrouwbaarheid, not sure, but some other options there as well. And if I do, I can now obviously sort there as well, according to the order of that specific aspect. Note that these options are also available for reporting, which it wasn't before. I'm not going to show it, but you can now select these columns for your reports as well. So on the dashboards, on your document reports, etc., you can select them and report on them as well. Kind of related to it, but not too much, I guess. It's the same BIA levels, but which we now show and apply on risks and incidents as well. So if we take a look at the operational executions, and we would go for the list of risks, and we would open one of them, let's take this one. You can now see that there is a new field, the BIA impact, which allows you to select certain impacts or, well, the applicable availability, confidentiality, integrity levels in the default CIA model that applies to this specific risk. But if you have more models, you can actually select from other models as well. For example, if you have a quality model like this, or you have the, well, let's stick to the CIA model. You can say, okay, well, this risk has a high availability impact, so we can show that here, and then also report on it, take it into account for the impact assessment, etc. So it helps you to better indicate what this specific risk is all about. Previously, we had sometimes a custom configuration in which you could do some tick marks and indicate it in that way. That's still there if you have that applied, but you might want to consider transforming it into this new approach. Well, let's save it. The same goes for incidents, in which you can also have on the impact and effects, you can have the same BIA impact, but now for the incident itself. Now, this really has replaced the tick marks that were already there on availability, integrity, and confidentiality. But as that was fixed, and in different types of incidents, you would not have anything with these types of indications, you can now select it differently. So if this would be a quality incident, you can now say, okay, let's switch to the quality model. And it's actually upon customer experience, and it has a significant impact on the customer experience. So you can now more flexibly indicate what this type of incident is about. One last thing about the risks as well is that you can now configure the way the risk matrix is shown. By default, it shows the likelihood in the vertical direction, and the impact in the horizontal direction. But you can now switch that around. If for some reason you are used to having that in a different orientation, then you can now switch that. Obviously, you need to do that system-wide, because otherwise it would become quite messy and I think hard to interpret easily. But you have in the settings, you have now this risk matrix orientation, in which you can say, okay, which aspect of both of them is to be going vertical. So the default is actually the likelihood being shown vertically, but the impact vertically is the other way around. One other thing that's also here is that we just show the page layout orientation, and that's now, you can set a default page layout. So if you want to have, when you start new articles, you can state a default layout that's kind of implied by default, setting it up for your next version. But once an article is in a certain layout, it will remain that way until you change it manually, obviously. Okay, that's it on the BIA and the risk matrices. And while we're at the setup, let's take a look at the workflow. Don't save. We've extended the workflow somewhat, in which you previously you had, well, the screen would look at it a little bit different as well, but basically you would have set up the general items for a workflow, and then you would state some tasks, and for each of the tasks you would assign it to some specific user, or it would be the user of the entity to which it applied, the owner of the entity at that time. Now we have added one more option here that's about roles that you can define. And for a data breach, for example, you can now state that, well, you might have this owner of the data breach handling it, but you can also identify that there is someone like the data processing officer that might be identified for this incident. It can have a default SNE, so that means that, well, this might be your DPO actually within the organization. So all of the tasks that are assigned to the DPO will be assigned to, in this case, Jan Jansen. But you can also indicate that we have something of a manager within the workflow, and the manager needs to maybe inform or do some kind of approval. But as it is dependent on the department to which the incident, the data breach applies, that might differ. So there's no default SNE as such. But if you then look at the tasks, we can say, okay, for example, registering the data breach at the privacy authorities, that's actually assigned to a specific role. In this case, the DPO, Jan Jansen, which we already selected. But you also can see we have some other options here as well. You can still select a specific user. You can explicitly say, well, this task is always to be performed by the current user whenever the task is assigned. It can be the owner of the entity. or the default task owner, which is basically the, any owner that you can select when the workflow starts. But like I said, this one should be assigned to the DPO, and we can have different assignments for each of the tasks. Now let's see how that plays out in real life. Let's take the right view. Let's go to an incident. Let's go to a certain data breach here, and already a workflow has started, so that's a little bit inconvenient. Let's create a new incident here. So we have some kind of data breach. We need to indicate that, obviously. We have a data breach. Now it shows the apply workflow as a filled-in button, meaning it's kind of mandatory to apply the workflow. It will do so on saving it using the default settings. But when we apply the workflow, we can now say, okay, let's start it. What should actually be the start date? So that has remained. What should be the default task owner? What's the DPO? Well, we already stated it should be Jan Jansen, right? So it shows it. And who's to be the manager? Well, maybe the department manager. In this case, for this incident would be Helene. And now this workflow has been set up accordingly and assigned the tasks according to the workflow to the appropriate people as assigned here. So now we can go over the workflow just as it was before, but the assignments can now be better controlled. If for some reason that would change kind of during the handling of the incident, you can still manage this assignment, taking it back here and maybe change the manager from Helene to Hans. And although the already assigned task will not change, whenever that task would reoccur, depending on the workflow, it would now will be assigned to Hans instead. So it makes it a little bit more dynamic and more controllable who's to get a specific task within your workflow. Okay, going to the next one of the new features, that's about checklists. Let's take a look there. You already are familiar with checks. Most of your customers use them quite extensively. There are small changes and somewhat minor changes together that I want to explain. One of the minor changes is that the button that is shown in front of these checklists, whether or not to check them, they do now distinguish whether the check is actually to be performed. So this one, it isn't to be performed because no checklist or no check has been set. This one is actually to be performed because it's in the final month of the repetition period, and these are already overdue, so should be checked as well. And if we look at the other ones, you can see here as well. Well, this one, it's not yet in scope or to be performed, but these are, so they are highlighted as such. Moreover, when you look at the check itself, it now allows you to combine multiple controls to the single checklist. So as such, one simple or one single checklist may now apply to not only one control of a certain framework, but maybe multiple controls of the same framework, or to multiple controls of different frameworks, and thereby kind of ticking off the check on both of them or on all of them. That's it for regarding the checklist here. Well, there are some minor changes in the button layout, but I think that's nothing to mention explicitly. But from checks, we are in the kind of operating mood. We can look at the audits, which have gotten a change as well. For example, if we look at a specific audit plan, in this case, there are multiple locations where you can do this, but completed audits, once completed, they do now have a result of that audit actually shown. Previously, that was to be derived from the findings that you would have registered on this on the audit. But now it's also shown on the audit itself, making it more clear what the outcome of the audit was without looking at the findings. So during 2022, we had 2 surveillance audits apparently, and both of them went okay, but maybe later on we had a possible improvement there, and actually a minor improvement this year in the herhalingsaudit, in the repetition audit. And if we look into it, then obviously we can see, okay, yeah, indeed, there is a finding with a minor non-compliance. So it makes it a little bit more easy, more explainable what the outcome was of the audit as it has been performed. Now, when you have some findings, that might actually need some follow-up, obviously. And when we take a look at it, and we take one of the findings that we have already registered, let's take an old one, and that's by intention, because previously it was the case that the finding only had a single field, kind of, in which you needed to state the cause, impact, scope of the finding to comply to your standard, to the ISO 27001 standard, that is. Now there is an option to kind of, instead of having this single field, to separate it into 3 different fields in which you can state explicitly what's the cause, what's the scope, what's the impact of the finding, and document the non-conformity if it applies more explicitly. So yeah, I think we would help in this way users to better comply to what they are supposed to do. And actually, when you create a new finding, it will already by default use this layout in 3 different fields in which you can work and document according to the finding. Let's see. What's more there to show? I think that's the one on auditing. A small one, but nonetheless very important to some of you. When we look at KPIs, until now it was the case that KPIs kind of, you had to remove them or they would remain visible within the list, and sometimes annoying users that were assigned to it, although the KPI was already completed or not applicable anymore. So what it missed was to have a way of archiving it. And for example, if we now say, well, we have this KPI on some data sources that are available to our employees. We've tried to manage something, but it's now done we now have the option to archive the KPI. And as a result, when we archive it, it obviously will disappear from the list. It will no longer appear in the overview on your start page if you were assigned to it in some way, but you can still get a list of them back if you click on the tick mark here. It will show you the finding, the KPI, sorry, once more. If it would show it to me, hopefully, yeah, there it is. So that now the old ones are there as well. The same goes for the questionnaires. So here also you either had to remove the questionnaire or make some note to the name or something that it was not going to be used anymore. But now this archiving option is there for the questionnaires as well. So you can easily kind of hide the ones that are no longer in use, but might still be very important for question forms that you have performed previously. So that was a small one basically, but nonetheless very important. a major one, at least in our opinion, is the one in which we now support different versions of your statement of applicability mostly. That is mostly because there's a little bit more to it. You now see that for this framework, the 27001, we actually have two variants for it. So you can maintain multiple statements of applicability, basically supporting multiple certifications for different parts of your organization. In this one, we have a kind of the default organization-wide certification or statement of applicability that's behind it. But also we have one specifically for Germany, in which there is it's the same framework, obviously, but it now allows you to have kind of a different statement of applicability for both of these parts of it. And moreover, and that's in general, that's available. For example, if we look at the DigiD, it allows you to have different versions of the DigiD as well. And let's make a small change here. So we have this current version. Maybe we say, okay, well, let's call this the initial version. That was actually earlier this year on September 1st, and well, I would be the one who published it. So now we have these different versions. We have a current version, so that shows you what the current layout is, and maybe we say, well, this is now all in progress. I want to quickly make that clear, so that's shown. And at some point I say, well, okay, I want to do another publishing of the current status. Obviously, I would not do it just for a few status stuff, but you might say, okay, this is the December version. Yeah, and so I can now maintain different versions for the same framework, and also on the reporting, obviously. So you can have your version 1.1, and basically that's what I've applied on the 27001. You can have different versions that will maintain over the years probably, and when you select them and then would do a report, you would get the reflection of the status of that control and its selected status remarks, etc., according to the version that you have published. If I selected such a version and then would open up a control, it will show that control as it is for that specific version also. And that means it's not editable, because we're showing a kind of frozen version, but we can, within the control, return to the current version and still make our changes if we want to make some changes there. Together with this change, we also added two new fields to the controls, which is the maturity levels. And there are two. You can set a goal maturity for a certain control and the actual maturity for this control. And obviously you could kind of make a questionnaire or do some auditing to determine whether this is actually the goal that you would like to apply or the maturity that applies, and then have that recorded. And again, recorded using the different versions to what extent your specific maturity is for this control. The list of maturity levels, it's this list by default, but you can modify that if you like. You can edit the labels, you can remove them, put new ones in. So if you have a different way of kind of registering your maturity levels, you can adapt that accordingly. And obviously, based on this, you can make your reports and make reports over different versions of your control, and thereby making it more clear and more insightful of how the maturity has changed over time. Another change that has been applied is about subcontrols. We have not yet have provided any frameworks that have subcontrols within them, but it is now possible to not only have certain controls within the framework, but have kind of more specific subcontrols, as it is stated, that add up to this specific control. I know there are some frameworks, but we still need to apply it as such. But it can be constructed in this way to have more detailed compliancy accordingly to these subcontrols. Okay, going to the next one. It's about the user profile. It's a small change, but when you click on your user profile, previously it was, I believe it was basically one page with all the information in there. Now it shows you a little bit more in another way. Also, you have your personal information, you have your preferences. There will probably be a security tab as well, but as I'm using single sign-on, it does not show that. But if it would, you would have a security tab here as well, in which you can set your password or reset your 2FA. That was already there, but still it's now on a separate tab. But also you can see that there is this organization tab, and that really helps you to know, yes, to which what roles do I have assigned, what teams am I part of. Maybe I'm allocated to a certain organizational unit, and that can all be shown here. An extract of it is actually shown on top as well to have a quick overview. But you can see it here as well. And in the enterprise editions, if you have some substitutions, so you can kind of do work on behalf of other users as well, you can also see this list of substitutions, the start and end date, if it applies to which extent you can actually substitute them. Now, when you do have some substitutions, you also see it here, obviously, but it's all part of your user profile now. And if you paid real attention, you can see that there is this kind of visualization on your user profile. That's for an upcoming change in which your user will be represented by a kind of a badge, in this case, based on your name mostly. And you can select a certain color to which you want to have it applied. Let's take this one. And your name will get a badge with this specific color. That's not yet shown within Base27, but it will be an upcoming feature to see that more consistently within Base27. Okay, finally, we've made some extensions to the community portal, and I think it's really worthwhile to point it out to you. We do know that sometimes users have a little bit difficulty in finding the user community portal, so let me show that to you as well. Basically, it's part of the support option, and when you open it up, there are two buttons, one to register your specific support request and the other one to visit the community portal itself. And when you click on it, it will open a new tab. I'm now switching it with access to the community portal. And here you can find all kinds of stuff like question and answers, the manuals, some tutorials, updates of the latest release. The one of November will be added in short time. But I wanted to point out this new feature in which we show the roadmap. So what are we working on within the company on Base27? What features are there for you to look out for? Maybe have some comments on it. For example, the table redesign here, I can see there is a comment there. So let's take a look. There is some activities. I actually don't see a comment. Oh, let's take to this one. I don't see any comment anymore, so that might be a little bit confusing, I can imagine. But we will share some ideas, some updates, some information there, and you may want to respond to it, and we will take that into account, obviously. But you can also see where we are working on currently, what's already ready for implementation, but we've not yet started to work on it, and what we are still planning to work on, kind of doing design for, etc. But also what has been completed. So this also shows, for example, the roles on workflow that has now been completed, and that's shown as well. Now, this might trigger you to also provide some ideas. And so that's the other option. You can put in ideas, and there's already a list there that we kind of extracted from some comments and requests that were provided by our users already. But you can submit your own ideas as well and just have them added to the list. People can vote on them. So the more votes, the more priority, I would say, that we will be working on them shortly. You can already see some of them are actually already planned for, like the improved text editor, sorting and grouping on special columns. Well, partly that has been done with the BIA column. The other part that we are working on is on the custom fields. And these custom fields, they don't allow sorting and grouping at this point as well. So we are making that possible as well. And once we've done that, it will be released. And you can see that here as well. But that's still to be done, I guess. I see there is a question. Does the language preference also change language of base? Yes. So returning to base and taking a look at the user profile, which I guess triggered the question. Well, what it does, if I would switch to Dutch and save it, it will show a remark that it will be applied on the next logon. So I first need to log out, then log in, and then base will be shown in Dutch. However, your content, your own content is basically just in the version or the language that you have created it in. So that will not change. But for example, the framework, the text of the framework, they will change in language. The menu, obviously, most of the stuff that's been provided by Base27 internally, that will change based on the language that you selected. Yeah, that would be my next question. So I've guessed I've answered that as well. But it also concludes my demonstration for today. So if you have any other questions, please come forward and ask them, and I can help you sort them out. Yeah, my camera is back on. Kind of lost it there. And again, well.
Well, it seems, yeah, Bernd, it seems that you have been very clear and explaining. So I think no more questions. People can always ask them online, email, etc., as they are used to, or using, of course, the support function in Base. We see a lot of questions always coming in there. So that stream is working, fortunately. So if there's no more questions, I suggest we call it a day and talk to you next time.
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you all.
Yeah. Merry Christmas.